You sense it long before you have any real proof. Something has changed. Something has gone silent. And you find yourself wondering whether you're overthinking things or whether your instincts are actually picking up on something true. That feeling that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, or that strange gap that appeared out of nowhere. That look in their eyes that once made you feel like you were the only person who mattered, but now just passes right over you like you're invisible. Yes, that feeling. It isn't paranoia, it's information. And today we're going to break down exactly what that information is telling you. Because here's the part nobody likes to admit. When someone with an avoidant attachment style has already moved on emotionally and set their sights on someone new, they don't come out and say it. They won't sit you down for a talk. They won't write you a note explaining it. They may not even fully accept it themselves. Instead, what they do is far more confusing, far more painful, and it leaves you questioning everything you thought you understood about yourself and about them. So if you've had this nagging sense that something isn't right, but you can't quite name it, keep watching because the clues are all there. They've been there the whole time. You just needed someone to point them out. And before we continue, I want you to pause for a second. If any part of this is hitting close to home, if it's making your chest tighten up, type the word aware in the comments below. Just that single word, aware. Because the first step toward protecting your peace is understanding what you're really facing. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, go ahead and do it now, because what we cover on this channel is the kind of thing that can truly reshape how you view yourself and how you allow others to treat you. All right, let's dive in. First, let me lay the groundwork. Let me explain exactly who we're talking about when we bring up someone with an avoidant attachment style, because grasping this is the foundation for everything else we'll cover. Someone who is avoidant learned early on that needing others felt unsafe. That reaching out for closeness was either met with silence or with hurt. So they did what any resourceful person would do. They put up walls. They trained themselves to bury their emotional needs. They learned to prize independence above all else. They created a story for themselves. It sounds something like this. I don't really need anybody. I'm fine on my own. People end up disappointing me eventually. Getting close to someone is just asking to get hurt. And they believe that story so completely that it becomes the default program running beneath everything they do in their relationships. It isn't that they lack feelings. Their feelings run deep. It's that those feelings terrify them. Intimacy feels dangerous to them. Being vulnerable feels like exposing themselves to harm. So they've become true experts at creating emotional distance, at retreating the moment things start to feel too real. Now, here's where things get complicated, because when you're with someone avoidant, there's a window, a stretch of genuine closeness, a time when they feel present, safe, and engaged enough to actually let you in a little. And that window is incredibly captivating. That version of them feels like someone truly worth loving. You catch a glimpse of the real person hiding behind all those defenses, and you think, this is it. This is someone worth putting in the effort for. So you start shaping your entire emotional life around chasing those rare moments with that version of them. But avoidant people, simply because of how they're built, are constantly on alert for a way out. Not because they're heartless, but because closeness eventually sets off their nervous system. Eventually, the relationship starts to feel confining. What was once comforting familiarity starts to feel like a trap. And whether they realize it or not, they begin searching for something that feels fresh, something lighter, something that hasn't yet stirred up all their fears around getting close. And that's the moment another person steps into the picture. Now, I want to be clear here because I'm not claiming every avoidant person cheats or lies. What I am saying is there's a very particular pattern that surfaces when an avoidant person has quietly shifted their attention to someone else, when they've made a silent decision internally that they haven't told you about, a decision they may not even fully own up to themselves. And these patterns can be spotted. Once you know what to watch for, they become impossible to miss. So let's break down the 4 things, the 4 specific behaviors an avoidant shows when they've already chosen someone else over you. The first one is that they become emotionally distant but blame it entirely on being busy. This one catches so many people off guard because on the surface it sounds completely reasonable. Everybody gets swamped sometimes, life gets overwhelming, work piles up, stress takes over. So when they start pulling away and tell you, I've just had a lot on my plate lately, your logical mind thinks, okay, that's understandable. I'll give them room. I'll be patient. I'll wait it out. So you wait. But here's what emotional intelligence teaches us, something Daniel Goleman wrote about so clearly. Our emotional truths come through, not in our words, but in our patterns, in how often someone reaches out, in the quality of the attention they give, in what someone chooses to do the moment they actually have free time and no pressure on them. That's when you find out who someone is truly prioritizing. Because think about it. Someone who's genuinely overwhelmed still makes time to check in with the people who matter to them. Someone who's truly stressed still sends a quick text at the end of the day that says, hey, thinking about you, tough day, but I'm okay. Because when someone genuinely feels connected to you, you become a source of comfort for them, not a burden. But once an avoidant person has emotionally turned towards someone else, you stop being their comfort. You become one more thing they're trying to avoid. And the "I'm just busy" excuse becomes remarkably convenient because it isn't even a lie exactly. They might really be busy, but somehow that busyness applies specifically to you. There always seems to be enough time for everyone and everything else, just never quite enough time for whatever you were hoping to get from them. And what makes all of this so emotionally disorienting is that when you try to bring it up, when you say, "I've been feeling like we've grown distant lately," they act completely confused. They say, "What are you talking about? I've just been busy," or "You already know how things have been." And you start to feel like you're the unreasonable one, like you're asking for too much, like you should just be more understanding. So you pull back, and quietly, they feel a small wave of relief because the pressure has lifted, and the distance grows just a little more. None of this is an accident. It's a pattern built over years of protecting themselves emotionally. When an avoidant person feels drawn towards someone new, they begin quietly detaching from what's currently familiar to them, and they do it little by little, so gradually that by the time you actually notice the gap, it's already been growing for weeks. You need to trust what your gut is telling you here. When a connection that used to feel effortless starts feeling like a chore, when you're the one always reaching out and always coming up with excuses for why it's probably nothing, pay close attention. That uneasy feeling you have is your emotional intelligence trying to hand you information. It's trying to tell you that something real has shifted. The second sign is that they stop putting effort into the relationship, but let you carry all the weight instead. This one hurts in a quieter way because it's subtle, and it takes advantage of something genuinely good in you. Your ability to care deeply, your willingness to keep showing up, your belief that if you just love harder, if you just communicate more clearly, if you just give them a little more space or patience or presence, you can fix whatever has gone wrong between you. And here's the truth, avoidant people pick up on this about you. Not always in a calculated or manipulative way, but on some level they sense that you'll hold the relationship together while they quietly step back from their side of it. And they let you do it because it works in their favor. It keeps things comfortable enough that they never have to have that hard conversation. It gives them room to drift towards someone new without carrying the guilt of having walked away themselves. When someone is truly committed to a relationship, both people feel the weight of keeping it going. Both people notice when something feels off, and both people try to do something about it. There's a shared investment, a mutual sense of urgency. When one person starts pulling away emotionally, that shared effort disappears, and you're left feeling like you're rowing a boat by yourself, worn out, confused about why they're not picking up their oar, telling yourself they probably just need some time. Goleman talks about what he calls the amygdala hijack. That moment when an emotional trigger overrides rational thinking and floods your system with one overwhelming reaction. For you, in this situation, that hijack often shows up as anxiety, as this frantic urge to fix things, to find the right words, to do something that makes them feel connected to you again. And that anxiety, even though it makes total sense given what you're going through, actually feeds right into the avoidant pattern. Because here's what happens in this dynamic. The more you chase, the more they retreat. The more you try to reconnect, the more trapped they feel. And they take that as proof that the relationship itself is the problem, that you're too much, that they need someone who doesn't make them feel this way. So they start picturing the other woman as easier, lighter, more fun, less pressure. But what they're actually reacting to is the direct result of their own pulling away. You wouldn't be anxious if they hadn't withdrawn. You wouldn't be fighting this hard if they were fighting right there with you. The very dynamic they're using to justify leaving is something their own behavior created in the first place. When you realize you're the only one making an effort, when every attempt to reconnect gets met with a polite but distant reply, when you're the one suggesting plans, organizing everything, and reaching out first every single time, that isn't a relationship anymore. That's you holding on to something that has already let go of you. And painful as it is to see that so clearly, seeing it clearly is where your power begins. The third sign is that they suddenly become very guarded about their phone and their time. Before I go further, I want to say that having some privacy in a relationship is healthy. People are entitled to friendships, personal space, and conversations that belong just to them. I'm not talking about someone who has always kept reasonable boundaries around their personal life. I'm talking about a shift, a sudden change in behavior that doesn't fit the pattern you've known all along. You know how someone acts in a relationship after months or years of paying attention. You know what's normal for them. And when that normal shifts, it matters. That's real information. When an avoidant person begins genuinely putting emotional energy into someone else, something changes in how they handle their private life. The phone that used to sit face up on the table now sits face down. The easy, casual talks about their day start having gaps in them, small, vague spots where the details just aren't quite there anymore. Plans start becoming flexible in ways they never used to be. Cancellations show up with explanations that don't fully add up. And on their own, none of these would seem like much. But they're never on their own. They're always part of a bigger cluster of changes, all pointing the same direction. Here's what research on emotional intelligence tells us about behavior under guilt or hidden truths. People start avoiding anything that might expose them. They begin managing access, not in a dramatic or obvious way, just enough to build a buffer between the truth and the people closest to it. And because avoidant people are already so skilled at creating emotional distance, they're remarkably good at this kind of management. It comes almost naturally to them. You'll also start noticing that they get defensive faster. A simple, casual question about what they've been up to, something you've asked 100 times before without any reaction at all, now gets met with a slightly sharp tone, a bit of a why all the questions vibe. Then they soften it right away because they don't want to fight. But that flash of defensiveness tells you something. People who get defensive are protecting something. What makes this one so painful is that it makes you feel like you're losing your grip on reality, because on the surface, nothing is actually being said. No confessions are happening. If you try to point it out, you end up sounding paranoid, jealous, insecure. And they know that, whether consciously or not. They know the plausible deniability of small secretive behaviors works as an incredibly effective shield, because you can't argue with nothing concrete. But you don't need to argue with it. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to pay attention to how you feel inside the relationship and ask yourself honestly, does this feel safe? Does this feel like a real partnership? Does this feel like someone who's fully present with me? And if the answer is no, that answer deserves to be taken seriously. The fourth sign is that they start painting you as the problem. This might be the most psychologically complex of all four, and it's the one that causes the most lasting damage if you let it go unchecked, because what it does is rewrite the whole story. It shifts the narrative in a way that lets the avoidant person feel justified in what they're doing. And it does that by turning you into the villain of your own relationship. Here's how it plays out. When an avoidant person has already turned emotionally towards someone else, they run into a problem. That problem is cognitive dissonance. On some level, they know that what they're doing doesn't line up with their commitments. That creates internal tension, and that tension feels uncomfortable. So the human brain, being the incredible rationalization machine that it is, starts building a case for why this is fine, a case for why they're actually the one who's been wronged, a case for why you're the one who drove them to this. And slowly, quietly, things start becoming your fault. You're too emotional. You're too needy. You put too much pressure on everything. You're never satisfied. You've changed. The relationship has felt heavy for a while, and somehow you've been the heavy one. Or maybe they've been quietly suffering, and now they've finally found something that feels light and good. And maybe that's exactly what they need. This story gets built slowly, through small comments, through sighs, through a certain look when you express a need, through the way they talk about the relationship whenever it comes up. And the tricky part is that some of what they say might have a small kernel of truth in it, because every real relationship has friction. Every real relationship has moments of heaviness and difficulty, so when they start using those real moments as proof of your shortcomings, it's easy to absorb it. It's easy to start believing that if you had just been different, if you had just been better, they would have stayed. But here's what emotional intelligence actually teaches us about this. Relationship struggles are shared responsibility. It always takes two people to create the dynamic between them. And when one person starts pointing every finger in a single direction, that act of pointing is itself a piece of information. Healthy people struggling in a relationship ask, what can we do differently? They don't quietly build a case against their partner while simultaneously pouring emotional energy into someone new. Goleman's work on empathy and emotional attunement applies here too, because what this behavior really represents is a fundamental breakdown of empathy. The willingness to let someone else carry the weight of your own unacknowledged choices. To let them believe they're the reason for a distance that has nothing to do with their worth and everything to do with someone else's inability to face themselves honestly. And I need you to really hear this. Whatever version of you they're criticizing right now, whatever flaws they've suddenly become so focused on, whatever things they're claiming you need to fix, none of that changes one fundamental truth. You deserve someone who chooses you on purpose, every single day. Someone who sees your complexity, your imperfections, your full, beautiful, messy humanity, and still says, yes, I choose you, not as a fallback, not because nothing better came along, but because when they picture their life, you're in it and they want you there. That's the baseline. That's the bare minimum. And anything less than that isn't something worth pouring yourself into. So where does that leave you? What do you actually do with all this? Because knowing something and knowing what to do about it are two completely different things. And I don't want to leave you sitting only with the pain of recognizing it. I want to leave you with something that actually helps.